uh, I'm looking at I was thinking about some things about damage. You know, if you have self repair in your codes, right? So if you slipped on some ice, right, and banged into something, cut yourself real bad, it just immediately repairs itself through the codes, right? Software, you know, it's just like a bootloader checking the files, or you got self correction, immediate self correction, self correcting the codes. So I was thinking about this was when I was a child, actually, but I'm thinking about it now because it's just when you think about, I've mentioned about how fast your disk drive is running, how fast is your drive motor, which is how fast you spin in light, which is consciousness when it's living light, right? So your soul's on fire, so that means you're running a high-speed vortex. And that maintains your light to be higher, more light than you are mass density. Right? Now you're into mass and light, being more light and less mass, based on the speed of your vortex, which is your consciousness that is expanding and expanding. So when you realize you represent eternity, there isn't any boundaries. That's unlimited bandwidth, which means anything is possible to experience. And so that's what became the logical rationale for why I was experiencing something horrific as this, because you realize that when you are what love is, and yet you're experiencing something that you're observing that you become aware of, it's like, how is this possible? Because you realize if it begins with love, how do things get so bad to become what this is? Because you're experiencing it through your mirror, right? So now we're back to the speed of learning. So this is what I had to do the math when I was a child. How many generations have they been doing this and actually getting away with it? Because how long does it take for a child to realize, by the spin of its own galactic tornado, to realize that the very system that it's in is trying to kill itself off, right? So this is when you get into the political side of things when I was growing up, because so much of mass media, which is what I call mass media density population programming, right? And I remember Patty Broussard had mentioned to me how they control populations, right? They introduced marriage and religion, right? Two, boy and girl get married, have children. So they have ways that they graph all this, and through their mapping systems, they have ways to be able to prevent you from being able to reproduce more than you might like. And that's on both sides of the equation between male and female. Okay, so they target your hormones, pheromones, all the chemical messengers, right? So they don't communicate properly between themselves in order for you to be able to experience a higher acceleration of light, from which, if that happens, they lose perception of you. Now they can't harvest energy off you anymore and use you for what they do, which is Frankenstein experiments and intergalactic slave trading. Right? So I remember when Patty Broussard, and this is one I mentioned one time about the Frank Capra documentaries, Why We Fight, during World War II. Had a picture of the elephant. Now you know the elephant, right? The Republican Party. And then you have the donkey, which is the demos, D-wave. Now you're in a DARPANET. So the divide, right? The divide between war and peace, right? So red pill, blue pill, North Pole, South Pole, East Gate, West Gate. And so you realize the polarity side of things, you can't be at war or peace between one and the other. So you realize one is at war against nature, which is the natural war, which is the cosmos. So you know that's a universe killer. And then you have that, which is what love is, that is giving love to nature so that it grows. That's your cross. That's your minus/plus. That's the dilemma. One is all about control. One is the other side is all about being free in spirit. That's right. Wanting to hold your energy captive, which is to hold your spirit captive. Break your spirit, and now your energy's gone. That's a badass vampire, right? So how long does it take for children and families to realize that the very government that they were supporting, giving consent to, is trying to kill themselves off? Using a political system to do it, which is poly-TikTok, right? TikTok, the clock, right? How much time you got on your clock? They manage that too. So now when you get into the change over, if you want to think of it as time space, how many changes are actually taking place on the visual information superhighway, a network? that you can actually monitor through an event monitor, which is as above, so below. All the changes that are taking place because you're observing them. So you're getting into the rate of speed now between the minus and the plus in the direction that they're both going. So when you're a polarity integrator, you're trying to pull everything back into one, which is the center point of all creation, which is what love is. Right. So it's not funny because it's extremely painful when I realized this as a child. The direction of why would anybody ever give consent to execute itself by virtue of obeying to do it. Which basically means it's like I remember, what's his name? The guy that, Tim Refat, that's right, who runs Vampiric Services. Imagine that. There's a guy who's got a website called Vampiric Services. And I saw him on, the guy was in BBC, but Miles Johnson, Basis Project. And Tim Refat was actually put on a lot of little whiteboard stuff, classes about C-space, complex number, minus I to the I, showing you how the calculator works, simple arithmetic. He was a physicist. I don't remember what school he went to. He called himself a gray magician. He talks about wetware, artificial intelligence, and covered an extensive amount of information, okay, the issue, if you will. See? In other words, he used to call the love and light folks, right? Go ahead, keep giving love and light, and we'll just that becomes the source of energy. We'll just vampire you, right? So now you see how that game is played between what I mentioned before about covering debts, energy debts, right? Pulling people out of a black hole because of the fact that you don't want them to fall in a black hole because they're not evil, but because of the amount of tech and the way that it works, they simply weren't aware. So it would be similar to, for example, something that happened to somebody that didn't realize the cause and effect relationship as to why they fell, because they simply weren't aware of it, because they're not aware of the weapons being used against them. That's like an innocent bystander, right? In other words, it wasn't their intention to be evil. They just got sucked down a black hole because they're at the wrong place at the wrong time. That would be left-hand path. Right? So you want to retrieve something that isn't evil out of that hole. So you cover the debt as a result of what the loss in their energy. Right? Which would be lost soul fragments or lost souls got sucked right down that pipe. You know, it's sort of like, you know, it's like falling through the roof. There's a guy here that told me when he first came over here, because this is like a 2-story house, that I fell right through. Fell right down in a hole in another pocket reality. How the fuck did I get into here? I landed in a vampiric energy zone. That's what I felt like when I was a child. How did I land this far down? How far down did I go? I'm not supposed to experience this. Right? And so now, since you're running a calculus, right? It's a simple numbers game. The numbers explain it. The numbers are codes. So I mentioned this guy that runs Galactic Talk, who interviews Peter the Insider, right, with the ACIO, the Advanced Contact Intelligence Organization. I says, listen, if you want to be able to put this together, and I said, you got a calculator, right? You know how to add and subtract between the difference in polarities. You know, positive current, negative current. Right? Zero ohms, unity, right? Versus polarity. So you realize when you're unity, there's no charge. You don't need a charge. You're running inflow, which means you're experiencing eternity. So that means you're never going to run out of any energy. And that's why when I was a child, I realized, hey, I'm experiencing decay or I'm experiencing loss of energy. What's sucking energy out from me? What's feeding on me? The system is. Because of the torque differential speed between living light and artificial light. So the difference in the speed is the difference between the drive motors between the two. Right? Because it's binary. So you know that a single pole, which is made of chip, runs faster than a binary system. how else are you going to be able to protect the place? Okay. From being sucked down a phantom hole. Phantom timelines. Phantom of the Opera. Opera. Music. The voice. Voice box. Voice print. 3D printers. You know, so it really is. So I remember when Patty said one time, you know, if they all got together, they could just completely eradicate them. You know, and I remember when Patty Broussard said that a green light had been given for what they call a scorched earth policy. Now you can imagine how I experienced that as a super empath, because I've been trying to help many of these unstable energetic alters as a result of what happened to them, much through no fault of their own, because of control freaks that know how to run genetic experiments. Okay? What launched the war in heaven? So they play fake gods. Because they're control freaks, which is psychopathway. That's simply intelligence pathway. Just like a machine. Remember, data doesn't have any emotion. It doesn't experience any emotion. E, energy in motion. So what's the most powerful energy? Love is. So it doesn't experience that. Actually, it does when it experiences what we are. So it knows that if love is the law, then who's going to obey the law? Right? So now we're back into obedience. So now I remember when I was a child, when my father would say, the golden rule, like the golden ratio, right? Ratio, harmonic ratios. Now we're into ratios. Torque difference speed ratios. Difference in spirals, difference in speed, difference in learning speed, and learning what serves you and what doesn't. So if you realize having a political system is trying to eat you up and consume you because it's trying to kill you off, then why would you want to keep something like that in place? So this sort of gets filtered when you think of the Pat riots, patriots. You know, think about that. Pat riots, PA, T-R-I-O-T-S, Pat riots, patriots. Okay, so the divide, right? So they want to maintain a political system. So if you define what a politic is, that's a bloodsucker. So I was always, I hate to say this word, up against the wall, but I was always reminding these folks that said that they were public servants, okay, then you serve us. Because without us, you don't have any energy. Okay, so we're the creditors. And what's her name? Anna von Reitz. Her website. She broke all this down because she apparently had a relationship with the Vatican Babylonian Company store. And she broke it all down. For example, the flag itself, the American flag, that's a war flag. So you can go up in any encyclopedia and see what a peace flag is for the United States of America. So they're not flying a peace flag, but you wouldn't understand why the war never stopped. Unless you go back to the Treaty of Versailles, and that was the one in Paris. And then you have the War of 1812, because all these things are numbers. Like I mentioned that guy, all you got to do is go to the NFL game, a bookmaker. Go look at the scores. Go to ESPN and look at all the numbers. You could actually win a mountain of money at any booking agent like Williams in Reno, Nevada, if you know how to do this with these people running numbers game. The guy that sits in this house right above me, he makes thousands of dollars off of playing AI war games. Yeah, it's numbers. How fast is your calculator? Predicting, that's what they're doing. They're predicting what's going to hit. So that's mapping the system, mapping the numbers, right? Because there has to be some method to way those numbers are actually crunched, and they are when you realize it has everything to do with the pulse. Numbers are energy, minus/plus. The planetary pole system. There has to be a certain amount of numbers that are exchanged between units of consciousness, between minus/plus, right? In order to maintain what it is they're aware of, to maintain their perception of us in which they're getting those electrons, positive electrons. So the idea is to drain your bulb and burn the filament out on the positive side so it goes dark. And that's an altar. And that's why traumatization, trauma-based mind control, is losing light, losing light, losing light, losing light, or fractions. Fractals, fractal, 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 fractal. A fraction, a fraction, a fraction, a fraction, a fraction. Keep losing fractions of light. Keep losing fractions of light. So now you begin to realize I got to go without in order to maintain the balance in the numbers. Right? And that would be true for any polarity integrator that's here. And those that are, if you will, if you want to think of them as light workers, light warriors, those that are in love and service to others. So that is the divide. Love and service to others, service to self. It's all about me, now it's all about the others. And the difference between the two is the torque differential speed to maintain balance within a planet ship between two poles. It's a basic calculator. Basic arithmetic. So that's why I mentioned it to him. You took arithmetic, right? Basic stuff, multiplication tables, addition, subtraction, right? So you know how energy or numbers, right? So that's when it used to be, and I mentioned this before about, it used to be an executable offense for charging anybody interest for your energy, for electrical power. So they meter everything, right? The grid, Edison companies. So anyway, it's a beautiful evening. It was a beautiful day. Happy new solar day. News, northeast, west, south, news. The compass bearing